What is your favorite urban legend? Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light? This one was big when I was in college. College girl going out to party loses her key and asks roommate to leave dorm room door unlocked so she can get in later. Girl decides to spend the night with boyfriend but needs to grab her books from the room for classes the next day. She enters the unlocked room in the dark, grabs her books and leaves. The next day she returns to the dorm to find police outside of her room. Her roommate has been brutally murdered and written in blood on the mirror in her room is "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" This one and people can lick too are my faves. Haven't seen this one mentioned. Person goes hiking alone and is taking pictures of the scenery. Gets pictures developed and there are a bunch of pictures of the hiker sleeping. By caught me hiking. Man goes into remote cabin for a night. When he goes to sleep, he notices the portraits on the wall that seem to be staring at him. When he wakes, he doesn't see portraits. He sees windows. I have always been interested in the Jersey Devil. They have found hoof prints on top of houses along with a piercing scream. It's very interesting. I think that's Santa. The choking Doberman. Woman comes home to find her dog is choking on something, having problems breathing. She takes him to the vet and returns home. A few minutes later the police arrive at her house, storm in and rush her out of there. They find an intruder passed out in her closet from loss of blood. Her dog had bitten off 2 of his fingers which the vet had removed from the dog's throat. My grandma told me this story when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure she thought it was real. There is a Japanese one. I can't remember the name of the yokai, but he lives in the bathroom. When you sit zone, he comes up behind you and asks you, do you want red paper or blue paper? If you chose red, he skins you alive. If you choose blue, he strangles you. The only proper response is no paper and he leaves you alone. I like with the Japanese ones that there always seems to be a right answer that will get you out of the situation. That removing a rib will allow you to perform autofellatio, and there's always that one celebrity who supposedly has done it, and the celebrity changes. For me it was Marilyn Manson. For someone else it could be Jack Black or something. It was rumored to be Marilyn Manson, but he never did it. Just like Kiss, the costume was all a show for the stage. His neighbors said he cuts grass in sweats and watches football like everyone else. Jackalopes. In Western and Wyoming people get the joke, have things like jackalope museums and road crossing signs, but some people do believe jackalopes exist. If I recall correctly, it started because people would see rabbits infected with show papillomavirus. It causes tumors that resemble antlers to grow out of the head and body of rabbits. Showing my age here, but a classic urban legend is that Mikey, from Life cereal commercials, died on Pop Rocks and soda. What was amazing is how widespread it was in the pre-internet days. He ran out of life. When living in Warsaw, Poland, I was introduced to 2 urban legends, both of which are apparently true. The first being Black Roman, the king of all the slums of Warsaw and general crazy person who wanders the streets. It's silly, and if you refute his claims to be king he'll come at you with a Swiss Army knife. The second, however, is the story of secret KGB tunnels that span the city, specifically between the president's palace and several important political buildings for escape tunnels that were built by Stalin during Russian control of Poland. I've met Black Roman, but I still was not able to find the tunnels in my short stay in Warsaw. The wild chickens that live under the 101 freeway in Los Angeles. Too spooky for me. One that I heard as a kid was about a guy going to clubs and bars pinning notes to people. The needle he used was so thin that the victims wouldn't feel it, especially when they were drunk. The person would only find out much later when they found the piece of paper stuck to them. The note would say, "You now have HIV." The perpetrator had AIDS and infected the needles with his own blood. I've heard something similar, called AIDS pixies, which just poke you with the needle or whatever sharp thing, not leave it in you. Supposedly this is a common occurrence at raves, though it sounds ridiculous. A bit late to the party here, and this was told to me years ago, so I can only hope for the best. The story is as follows. A man went to Japan for a vacation. He decided to stay in a family-owned motel while exploring. After a long day out, he gets back to the motel. Walking to his room, he can hear a woman singing. It's the most mesmerizing voice he has ever heard. He decides to follow the voice and comes to a room. He peers through the keyhole and lo and behold, see this girl slowly dancing while singing. She dances with his back to him but he cannot move his eyes. He is totally transfixed by this girl. So this becomes a daily routine. He would get to the motel and go straight to the room to peer through the keyhole. So one day, he gets back and all he can think about is this girl. He goes to peer through the hole, but instead of a girl, it's just red, nothing else. This man's curiosity is gnawing at him, so he speaks to the owner. He asks him about the motel and if he knows anything about the girl he's seen in this room. The owner immediately drops his head. He tells the man that his daughter had stayed in that room and that he has been asked before about the girl. The only problem is, his daughter was brutally murdered in that room. When asked why she was killed, the owner responds with, they thought she was evil due to being born with a red eye. Hey, frick that in this thread and you. Psychology class in a large lecture hall with a professor lecturing in front of a blackboard. Students decide to use some positive feedback to mess with the professor. The further to the right he moves, the more alert and tuned in they'll appear. The further to the left, they'll start paying less attention. By the end of the semester, the prof is practically teaching from the right corner of the hall. Twist, the prof planted that idea and trained the students to pay attention. This story was actually told to my class by our psychology teacher, except for the twist part you added. Not really an urban legend, but more of a folksy backwards tale from my native Ozarks. Back in the 50s, the US government decided to modernize the entire northern region of the Ozarks by introducing a steady source of clean and efficient hydroelectric energy. Thus, in the 70s, construction of a dam on the Osage River was completed, and a massive valley that spanned several counties was filled in with a deluge of muddy brown water from the Osage. A decade or two after the dam was finished, maintenance workers at the dam reported that an inflow pipe had become plugged. The dam was shut down for a few days, and 2 divers went down to the bottom of the dam to see what the trouble was. Only one diver returned, and he scrambled out of the water as quickly as he could, spouting a tail of a gigantic catfish the size of a car that was blocking the inflow pipe. This catfish, which apparently had grown to such a monstrous size due to the ideal conditions for catfish at the base of the dam and the abundant food that was pulled in by the flow of the water, had attacked the other diver and bitten him in half with one good bite. Just as the people on shore were handily discounting the diver's crazed rantings, a pair of severed human legs surfaced near the wall of the dam, and were promptly sucked under again by the titanic catfish. Of course the story is a load of crock. I've fished for catfish at the base of that dam and didn't catch a thing. If you go into your bathroom at 3 AM, turn off all the lights, scream Bloody Mary 3 times, turn the lights on and off 3 times, and then open the door, your mother will be there and tell you to shut the frick up because your parents are trying to sleep in the next room. An elderly lady would always bring flowers she picked from her garden to her local hospital to cheer up the pediatric patients. One day a worker was installing a new sign in the lobby when a metal bar from his scaffolding fell. He was harnessed into the part that didn't fall, but the bar hit the elderly lady with the flowers, killing her instantly. 2 years later the maintenance guy was walking down a corridor after hours when he faintly smelled flowers. He was instantly reminded of the flower lady. After that he heard a faint pss as if someone was calling for him. He started jogging and the smell became stronger. The same whisper beckoning him was louder. When he reached the end of the corridor he stopped dead in his tracks. A mist began to fall over him and the smell was overwhelming. He looked up and saw an air freshener. This sounds like a brutally good commercial for air freshener. A woman in the 50s was super proud of her beehive hairdo and used a lot of hairspray to keep it in shape. After a few months her head started itching, so she went to the doctor and discovered a spider had built a nest in her hair, laid eggs, and they had all hatched. She had no choice but to shave her head, and with each pass of the trimmers, hundreds of spiders fell out and scrambled into every corner of her home. She presumably set her house and all her belongings on fire, because spiders. The doll with the growing hair and nails. My cousin told me when I was about 7 and I just hated my life for a few days, then forgot about it until I was about 15. Lead pipe Louis, TL, DR. Dude who kills girl with lead pipe is free and hangs out in small town Vermont. He's 100% real, but people here still think he's an urban legend because his story is just too crazy. There's a town here in Vermont that housed the old state hospital for the mentally ill. It's pretty well known for the copious amounts of the mentally ill that now fill several halfway homes there since the asylum closed. It's also home Ben & Jerry's and the Alchemist Heady Topper. Who knew? So the story goes that Lead Pipe Louie is one of the criminally insane that are now free to wander the town with no supervision. In the 80s, Lead Pipe Louie killed a girl in the middle of a pedestrian mall with a lead pipe because voices told him to. He was sent to the state hospital where he tricked the doctors into releasing him and now rides his bike around carrying a lead pipe waiting for the voices to tell him who's next. In high school, whenever we drive through this town, we try to guess which one was Lead Pipe Louie. I worked at one of those halfway houses during a college break and had a brief run-in with him, so his story has always freaked me out. Years later, I finally Google this guy and find out the story is real and pretty close to the urban legend. In 1980, Louie walked up to a woman eating lunch with friends in a pedestrian mall in downtown Burlington. He beat her to death with a pipe in broad daylight because a voice told him. Declared insane, he was sent to the state hospital indefinitely for treatment. 25 years later, doctors deemed him rehabilitated and his paranoid schizophrenia managed with medication. He's 100% free as long as he takes his medication. He rides his bike around town all the time. I see him every time I go pick up Chinese food. I just tried googling him, but I could find absolutely nothing on him. When I was a kid, I didn't know where your eyelashes went, like why they don't grow all down your face. For whatever reason, I got the idea that tiny little silkworms or whatever crawl into your room at night and chew off the extra, and I imagined their little cute faces. I would try and stay up all night and catch them, but I never did. This isn't really a legend of any kind. I just wanted to tell someone. That's freaking adorable. For initiation, gangsters drive around at night with no lights on. Then, when some poor soul inevitably flashes them, the driver follows him wherever he's going and kills him. Then the driver's in. As a new driver, I'm always a little worried about flashing people at night. That car has been following us since you flashed your lights at them. Oh, okay. I'll drive to the police station. A popular urban legend, as told by a buddy of mine, and I fell for it. An old lady kept giving me strange looks at the supermarket. I didn't think much of it, so I ignored her and continued shopping. I picked out only a couple of items, a bottle of water and a granola bar, but she followed me around the store the whole time. I thought I had lost her, but when I got in line to pay, I noticed she was a few people ahead of me in line. She told the people behind her to go ahead of her, putting her right in front of me. She turned around to speak to me and told me that she had been watching me shop. She said that I looked exactly like her son, who had passed away recently. She began to cry. I consoled her, and she asked me for a favor. I said okay, anything to help her out. She asked if I would say goodbye to her, so she could get closure by saying goodbye to her son one last time. I was a little weirded out, but I agreed. She got to the cashier, rang up all of her groceries, and turned to me. She said goodbye, son. I said goodbye, mom, and added I love you. She smiled at me, blew me a kiss, and walked away. The cashier rang up my few items and said my total was $75.90. I said for only a water bottle and granola bar, to which he replied yes, and all of your mother's groceries. Clown statue. A babysitter taking care of two small children called their parents late in the evening to ask for permission to cover up the life-size clown statue in the corner of the family room. It's not that I don't like it, she said. It just kind of freaks me out with nobody else here. It's hard to watch TV. The parents' reaction to her request freaked her out even more. What clown statue, they asked. Frantically. Dial 911. Call the police. Do it now. And the call came from inside the house. Oh, wait. I am actually trying to gather urban legends and generally scary stuff from all over, and mostly have found American and Japanese urban legends, typically involving paranormal situations. My favorite, however, has got to be, I would say, the Slitmouth Woman. It tells of a woman who would wander the streets nightly, looking for children or women whom were running late alone. She would politely ask them if they thought she was pretty, maybe dolling herself up. If you had said no, you would be violently stabbed and left to die, but if you said yes, she would peel away her surgical mask. This was common practice in Japan to wear surgical masks to avoid the spreading of sickness due to close quarters and frequent public transport. Under the mask reveals she has massive Glasgow cuts along her face, almost ear to ear. She would then politely ask if she was still pretty. If you said no, you would be gutted and left to die. If you said yes, she would slit your face similar to hers, and you would possibly bleed out on the pavement. The only way to escape her is to ask if you, yourself, are pretty, calling her average or so-so, or simply saying you have to hurry along, as she will apologize and let you be on your way. Overall, this is my favorite paranormal legend, because all the American ones are cliché or copied from Britain. The Jersey Devil. But there's one in the Japanese side of my family about an ancient samurai sword that is somewhere with distant relatives that will continue to be passed down to children and the family with Japanese blood. Babysitter gets several calls late at night. After a while, she gets freaked out and calls the police, asking if they can track the number. 2 minutes later they call back. Go outside now and wait for us. The calls are coming from inside the house. When a stranger calls. My mom comes from an old school Chinese family, and my grandparents have tons of superstitions legends they believe in. One of the stories that my mom told me is that if you're sick and have a dream, don't eat or drink anything in the dream, especially if somebody in the dream offers you something. If you do, you're going to become a part of that world, you're gonna leave the real world. When my mom was growing up, one of her neighbors became really ill, and said that for multiple days she would have the exact same dream of walking around in a bakery. Everything in the bakery smelled and looked amazing, but she didn't touch anything. Then one day in the dream, a woman in the bakery offered her a slice of cake, and she politely refused the cake. After that night she never had that dream again. Where I grew up, a woman named Mamie Thurman was murdered with her throat cut ear to ear in around the 1920s-1930s. Her body was dumped on a road that led to a coal mine. A rich businessman confirmed that she had been cheating on her husband with him, but her lover's black handyman was convicted of the crime. Oddly enough, her body is now lost after her grave was moved by her family. Now no one knows where her resting place is. People believe that her lover was the one who killed her, and she's said to haunt the road. Now this is where things get weird. People claim to have picked up a female hitchhiker who disappears after they've driven for a while, and there's some strange magnetic pull at the bottom of the hill. If you stop there and shift into neutral, your car will appear to roll backwards uphill, and locals say that Mamie is trying to pull you up the hill to the place she was dumped. I've done the backwards uphill thing, but I haven't been outside of the car to observe if the car truly rolls up the hill or if there's a small dip in the road for your car to roll into. I discovered this one while living in South Korea. Fans left on in a closed room remove oxygen and cause death by suffocation. As a result of this myth, fans in Korea are all equipped with sleep timers. Hilarious, yet serious, fan death. A young man is out clubbing. His drink gets spiked. The next thing he knows, he wakes up in alleyway in a pool of blood, with a stitched up wound minus a kidney. My ex-mom-in-law used this to stop my ex go traveling when he was 18. He never got to go. There are many in Hawaii based on modern and ancient folklore. Menahune is mentioned here in the comments somewhere. Another is of all Makokah, or spiritual family guardians that take the shape of a specific native animal. Not all in that species, but a specific animal or two. Owl, turtle, shark, etc. My old Hawaiian studies professor gave an account of a past student who would come to class covered in bruises. This particular student lived on an old property he inherited from his grandparents after both had passed. He had no idea where the bruises came from, but would find fresh bruises every morning he woke up. He was instructed by my professor to look for any puka, or hole, on the property. He found a puka as deep as a well and could hear a faint sound of water below. Turns out that the puka led to an ancient volcanic tube that opened up to the ocean. He shared his discovery with my professor, who then instructed him to toss fish down the puka. The kid did as directed, and the bruises stopped from then on. It is said that his family's Makokah, a shark, had occupied that volcanic tube, and it is each family's responsibility to take care of their particular Makokah, else there be consequences. Knowledge of Makokah is kept secret for protection from those who would mean to do it harm. It's likely that this guy's grandparents had been feeding this shark up until their passing and did not pass that knowledge onto their grandson. The native Hawaiian concept of responsibility is that you have that responsibility whether you are aware of it or not. Ignorance does not get a pass, as is the case for this guy getting bruised for not fulfilling his responsibility of caring for his Makokah. This might be a bit superstitious, but here's a few things that could be more relevant to anyone thinking of visiting Hawaii and might do some hiking. 1. Always hike with a partner. However, if you still decide to hike alone or get separated from your group, do not answer to anyone whose voice you don't recognize. If you hear a voice trying to lead you, do not follow it. It is believed that mischievous spirits occupy the forest and may lead you off a cliff. 2. If you're hiking in a valley and happen upon a large body of water, toss a leaf in. If it floats, then it's okay to swim. If it doesn't, then the moo, serpent, lizard, that resides in the water is present and does not wish for you to enter. Another sign that a moo might be present is the lack of vegetation on the perimeter of the water. I have more, but that's it for now. The man from Edgware, North London. He walked round, bent forward, and would go through the bins. Rumor had it, he was a famous brain surgeon. His daughter developed a brain tumor and he invented a method of getting rid of it. Doctors operated and performed the method he suggested. His daughter died. Because he felt so guilty, he gave up his huge house and money, roaming the streets wearing nothing but a pair of old shorts and withered trainers. I saw him so often walking the streets and used to want to stop and speak to him. Wish I had. He died a few years ago now. When I was in high school, there was an urban legend in my neighborhood about a guy known as Kill Kill. Kill Kill supposedly had murdered someone for talking to his girl, but was acquitted and about to be released. Kill Kill had a 12-inch penis, as thick as a 20-ounce soda bottle. There were several attractive girls in the neighborhood that no one would talk to because rumor had it, she was Kill Kill's girl. She was hot, but you couldn't satisfy her, and you'd get murdered. Bill Brasky. Stank Butt, intercity legend. Stank Butt is that homeless guy that you can smell but you can't see. He's ex-military and trained in guerrilla warfare. It's like you try and find him but you never can. Usually in big cities. Sort of like a guardian, but he will remove you if you compromise his mission. My favorite is the Tikbalang. It's a Filipino myth about a horse demon that shape changes into a family member, lures you into the woods, and then rapes you. This is what I've gathered online. I asked one of my Filipino friend and he only said it was something only old people talk about. I don't live there, but the urban legend of melonheads in Ohio or Pennsylvania seemed cool. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.